Hello and welcome to IBTimes UK. I'm joined by Christian Wolmar, leading rail commentator and London mayoral candidate. Christian, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
You've announced your Labour candidacy for the London mayoral elections. You're not a politician in the strict sense, you're not an MP. Why have you decided to run?
Well, I wanted to try and get to be selected as the London mayoral candidate for Labour because for two reasons really. One is that I've got some real ideas about transport. I've been working in transport for the last 20 years and transport is a key function that the mayor has control over. And secondly, I think that the idea that politics has to be restricted to just experienced politicians is a big mistake. I think that politics would be enlivened if people like me and indeed other people with similar experience to mine came forward and were prepared to debate the issues and stand for election.
But is there an argument to be made that the fact that you aren't an MP like some of the other potential candidates who are running, that you lack the necessary experience to be involved in that world?
Look, just because I haven't been a politician all my life doesn't mean I haven't been involved in politics. I've been writing about social affairs of various kind, local government, housing and transport for more than 30 years. I've met endless numbers of ministers, senior civil servants, people who make the policy and written about it, discussed the issues. So I'm well versed in what needs to be done as London mayor. And so I don't think that that experience is any less than actually some of the MPs who might be putting themselves forward who have really not much experience either of actually running things, but they have a lot of experience of policies and that sort of aspect of life.
So what do you think are the most important policies needed for the capital?
There's two big issues that are looming. First of all is transport, which is a key function of the mayor. The mayor has control over the buses, over the London Underground, over the trams, over the major roads and so on. And we really need a shift of emphasis away from car use. I think every city that is prospering has realised this, and that you can't attempt to accommodate the needs of the car. And Ken Livingstone started this with the congestion charge, but we need to build on that, to build on reducing the impact of the car and improving public transport in order to meet the growing population. And that triggers off the second aspect of this, which is housing, which is probably the biggest crisis facing the capital, particularly affordable housing. And here I think one could look at the mistakes that have been made over the past 8 years or 7 years by Boris Johnson, who has actually failed to address the fact that it's no good just building a lot of luxury blocks for people, overseas investors, and thinking that you're doing something for London. You actually have to provide social housing, genuinely affordable housing, housing that first-time buyers can buy, and good rented accommodation in the private sector. And that, I think, is the priority for a mayor, to ensure that that can happen.
When Boris Johnson leaves office next year, he'll leave behind a legacy from the Boris Spikes to London Overground to spearheading through the Crossrail scheme. What do you think his legacy will be, and if you became mayor, what kind of big schemes would you have for the capital, transport or otherwise?
Well, it must be said that most of what Boris has opened, as it were, has been ideas that came from Ken Livingstone and schemes that were developed by him. So the London Overground was a very successful scheme to open up parts of London to the railways, which has proved enormously popular. That was a scheme from Ken Livingstone. The bikes, he was going to do a similar scheme. Congestion charge was obviously Ken Livingstone. Now, I think that there's two things I would do. One is I would transform the centre of London into an environment where the car is no longer dominant, and so you would then have a much better environment for people and cyclists, pedestrians and cyclists. I would start with pedestrianising Oxford Street. I think that would be a real emblematic thing to do. It would actually change the character of the street. Oxford Street is, commercially the most important street probably in Britain, and yet is dying because of the amount of traffic, the buses and the taxis and so on, and is in severe danger of actually losing out to the various out-of-town or suburban centres like Stratford, Shepherd's Bush and so on. And the other thing I would do is push ahead very quickly with a whole series of maybe smaller schemes that are not necessarily big eye-catching things, but things that would make a difference to people's neighbourhood. So, reopening a station here, looking at the way that you might be able to reopen a station in certain parts of London, or a short line or whatever, tram schemes, things that will make a quick impact without this sort of mega schemes that politicians are often pushing. I would, though, support the idea of a second Crossrail line. I think that is absolutely essential. We need to boost public transport capacity, and that's one way of doing it.